GCTV's new news magazine format program, and we feature events and people from around our viewing area. My name's Lawrence Molczyk, and I'm one of the volunteer producer programmers here for GCTV. And the segments that you'll see this evening are programs that I've produced. When I first met Bucky Callery, he was first carving duck decoys on his coffee breaks and during his lunch hour at the woodworking shop where we both worked. So together, let's both take a look at what he's been up to for the past few years, and we'll go to Gill, Massachusetts, and take a look at the art of deception.
One of the reasons why I was attracted to decoys, or birds in particular, is because their lifestyle is very unique. They get to migrate, they get to go like to South America, southern United States, coastal regions during the summer, and in the wintertime they get to go up to Canada, northern United States. They get to hang out on these beautiful ponds. They can fly. This is my personal favorite here. It's a Hudsonian curlew, and it's kind of funny, a personal favorite because they're all personal favorites. It was done the old-fashioned way. It's very time-consuming. The beak is connected to the head. In the back here, I've driven a wedge in. It's an old traditional way of putting a beak in. If a beak was put in this way and it broke when a hunter was hunting for these particular birds, they could fix it in their own rudimentary way. They would see the bird in its natural setting, and they would interpret how that bird would look like as a decoy. And they had to simplify the form, they had to simplify the color, the plumage, they had to bring all this together and in a simplified form, and that's, to me, is part of the beauty of a decoy. Incredible what they were able to produce without machine tools. I first got interested in decoy carving when I saw a stamp put up by the Postal Service. It was a picture of a broad-billed decoy, and the lines were beautiful, and I said to myself, I can do that. That looks like a fun project. So being the foolish person that I am, I was working in a woodworking shop at the time, and I thought about different ways of making a decoy, and I asked a few people, and I come up with a method of cutting 3 small pieces of wood and gluing them together to get a large piece, about 6 inches or so. That also served to save me a few extra dollars, because I figured if I'm going to try something, I don't want to waste $300 on a piece of wood. So I I drew the picture, drew the outline of the decoy, and I started carving away without any real idea of how it was done. And it came out reasonably well. It was a lot of fun doing it. The process was great with you. Once I was just carving the form, the tail, the head of the duck, and got to be kind of like magical. All of a sudden, after working away for a couple hours, you have something that looks like a decoy. Of course, looking back, that particular one I thought was great at the time, but at this point I wouldn't look at it the same way, but that's the way it goes. It was about 5 years ago that I did my first decoy, and this one's very similar to that in its construction and just my ability to see different things, just the experience of doing decoys. It seems the more experience you have, the more you see. You do one and then you work at it for 8 or 10 hours, and all of a sudden you don't like it. You see your mistakes in it. This, I see a lot of mistakes. To me, that's fine. I can deny that there are any if I want to as well, but that's okay. But it's a very traditional, early type one. I had no idea what I was doing when I started, so and it came out well in all those terms. And actually, it's I like it. Even though the beak is very unlike anything that I would make right now. I had no idea where to buy the eyes. I've come up with that. The head is sort of small and narrow. The neck has no real life to it. It's sort of straight, and where it connects to the body is very rudimentary, but it works. And that's what's great about it. And the more I see it, the more I like it. Since then, I've gone on to a little more detail. In fact, a lot more detail. And what's great about decoys is it's a level of development. It's a process that you can start here, you can start there. You can go on forever to refining your technique and your art form. I've been to museums and just being close up to decoys. Some of the modern day masters, they've created decoys that you could be right next to from 3 feet away, and you ask yourself, this is not a decoy. They look so alive, they look so real. As I made a few months ago, and it shows a lot more detail than something like the pintail, which is a more traditional way. This was sort of copied, worked from a famous artist that worked in Illinois in the Mississippi Flyway. These, as decoys have advanced in years, detail has gotten much more advanced. There's ways of making feathers, there's ways of recreating feathering, there's people spending a lot of time carving in feathers with a soldering iron, with specialized tools. Years ago, those guys really didn't have $3,000-4,000 in tools, just power carving tools that can enable you to get into ridges and smaller areas and cut your time by at least by 3/4. Speaking of tools, this is why don't we just go into the workshop and I'll show you some of the tools that I use, and just to give you an example of what's in a good example of how a decoy gets started. If you're fortunate enough to have a book around that, like so, a decoy pattern book, you can get the particular duck and you can make a little puzzle out of it, trace them out, put them on a rough form of wood like this, draw it right in, put the pattern on the top, trace it out, get your head pattern right here, then buy a $500 piece of equipment, which is right here, and you're all set. What's great about decoy carving, it involves a lot of different elements. It involves art, it involves design, it involves physiology of animals, it involves just observation of nature. This particular piece is a black duck, and I've used this. This is very simple to have a book like that. Sometimes I don't. Like a seagull here, I wanted to do a seagull, and all I had to go on was this book right here, and I had to get my piece of wood, figure out what kind of wood I had, then make my dimensions smaller or larger according to my wood. I had to do all this figuring, make the form smaller, whereas having a pattern makes life a whole lot easier. These are sort of things you learn. Getting back to this black duck, which will eventually look something like this particular creature right here. See, when I do a duck the first time, I'll go to a master, someone who's recreated a decoy, and copy their decoy, and then the next two or three I'll take my chances. Start off with a block of wood. I draw the design on it. I draw it from this perspective, from this perspective. The first cut goes to the bandsaw, and I cut it out lengthwise, and I get this shape. I save the top view, I tack this back on, and I cut out this shape right here. And we'll end up with something like this. And at this point I've worked with the number of dimensions. The head will go on separately. The head, once I get this cut out here, I'll get my middle lines, and I'll glue the head on separately. Once the head's on, I can begin carving, of course, depending on how you like to work. Some people will carve the body first and save the head for later. There's a lot of variety and variability in working. Everyone has their own methods. That's what makes this art form so great. And there's the spoke shave, and this takes a lot of wood off really quickly. As you can see. Okay, the old timers would use this. Sometimes they'd get an axe and they'd get a big chunk of wood and they'd whittle away at it. I can't imagine anyone doing that. This tool really takes off a lot of wood quickly. I'll show you the difference. Now you can see just what I've taken off in a matter of seconds compared to a rasp. If I was to do this with a rasp, this is what some people, this is what they've done. Just a rasp. Some people still work this way, even today. This is a whole different ballgame, and there's a lot of tools out there. There are some instances where you have to use a knife. This is any kind of a knife. It doesn't have to be expensive. You can buy them. You can get real expensive. There's all kinds of knives, and knives do a great job. They take a little bit longer, but they're fine. You have these X-Acto knives that work fine, and with decoys, there's all kinds of different places where you'll need different knives, and you just can use a variety of tools. You can actually do one with a $2 tool like this, and it might be a little bit harder, but the job can be done. These are dentist tools. This is to me, it's great. Some dentist friends that I told them I was carving, and they said, "Well, I have some great tools for you," and they come in handy. Regular pocket knives people use. We use filing. This is makeup for fingernails, whatever you emery things. Sometimes you have to smooth certain areas, and you just can't get into an area without a particular tool. And it's great to have them available. Now here's a little tool that it looks like I might have got from a dentist, but I didn't. I wish I had. It would have been a little cheaper, but it makes it the same sound. Nope, no, it doesn't. Yeah, there's that familiar sound. Is this? The other thing that it has in common with the dentist is that you will have a big bill eventually. The tool I used to use for stained glass, and it's used for etching in feather designs. And it makes it easier when you can put all these things together. Yeah, it would help to have an art degree just to make the painting that much easier, but it's just not necessary. And my feeling is that this art form comes from a time where men and women were more self-reliable, self-sufficient, independent. They had to do things on their own. They had to hunt. They had to use the decoys for hunting purposes. And we're sort of recreating that now, but I think the feeling is still there for me, and I'm sure a lot of other carvers feel the same way, that if it needs to be painted, I'll take the risk. Even though I don't have that art degree in painting, it's not my strong field, I can do it, I will do it, and that's the bottom line. Typically where decoys originated, it started with the Indians. The Indians made some very simple decoys, but it has evolved quite significantly. People would say you could look at the sky and it was dark with birds, and after unrestricted hunting for a number of years, those numbers just were reduced to some birds became extinct. Some birds you wouldn't find one in a whole season sometimes. For us, the government passed a migratory duck law in the early 20s, which limited the amount of ducks that a hunter could kill at one particular time. It restricted when they could hunt and what rifles they could use. Things have changed a bit since then, and in fact most people buy decoys now just for investment and for a mantelpiece, whereas before they were a utilitarian art form. Their main purpose was to attract ducks or waterfowl and to shoot them. And you can imagine the poor ducks after spending a whole summer in Canada or northern United States coming back and seeing the decoys there, and one duck would say to the other, boy, what a nice place to, boy, there must be a lot of vegetation to eat here because all these other ducks are there, and all of a sudden they would stop and they'd get shot at and whatever, and one would say to the other, I knew we shouldn't have left so early, and there's nothing wrong with shooting them. I mean, people, they're out there for us to eat. At this point in history, we're at a position where we have control over a number of aspects. Not just decoys, it's an environmental issue.
July 4th. If you've ever wondered what it was like to be a JC on the 4th of July, Gary Braff offers us some different perspectives on the traditional July 4th fireworks. Gary's on the board of directors of Greenfield Community Television, and we're glad to have his submission for Valley Visions. If you know of a story or if you have amateur videotape and you would like to have a submission of your own to Valley Visions, give us a call and we'll help you put it together into some kind of a program format which will fit on our program. Now, if you'd like to learn to produce your own programs, or if you'd like some kind of training, we'll provide both the equipment and the training for you. And so with that, how about if we take a look at Gary Braff's The Top of the Mountain.
You know, polyester doesn't burn real well.
Just sticks a little bit.
Oh, so what's the heck? You know, a little gooey mess here and there.
Oh, it's just the impact.
I shouldn't be around you when you're packing those things? Or is that why you use...
Over there is fine.
Is that why you use wood instead of anything metal? Each one has to go to the bottom of the rack. And it has to be set just right with the fuse up instead of off to the side, right?
The fuse is on the side.
Looks like exacting work.
I'm getting close to finishing down there, I think.
So all those little ends have to fit together. Mud racer. ready?
Yeah.
Here we go.
Tommy, turn on the camera.
Turn it on. Here it goes.
Here we go.
Tell me, you gonna help?
The one you told me. See, that's what you said.
It's every time Still going after it. They're still going after it there. Look out.
Yes, is that there's like a missile. Is it fire back there?
No, prepare to fire. And he's getting the hell out of it.
When my son Ben was confronted with being bored out of his skull this last winter, when both his brother and sister were in school, there was respite for both him and I at the drop-in daycare center here in Greenfield. Now, the drop-in center closed earlier this month, and I was one of the parents who was invited to help say goodbye. I'm going to miss those people at the drop-in center because they had a lot to do with the raising of my son, and I'm glad that they did, because they're the kind of folks that I'm glad could be a part of that. I'd like to take a look at what's going on here with the drop-in center. There were some folks that just felt that somehow it was time for a change.
I got the Monday morning dirty diaper blues. My baby won't sleep and my son's in the terrible twos. You know I love my kids, but I need a snooze. I got the Monday morning dirty diaper blues. Now here's the chorus.
On June 20th of 1991, the Drop-In Center closed its 13-year-old program of short-term child care and parenting support. Loss of state funding last year and a reduction in local funds this year have left the program with insufficient funding. A goodbye party and celebration of the drop-in program was held at the Drop-In Center on Monday, July 15th. There were children's activities and entertainment, as well as a chance to see old friends. The celebration included an action of protest over state funding cuts. Used toys were sent to the governor, each representing a child who in the present or the future will no longer have child care and family support.
Of the Parent-Child Development Center, I have seen the services in the Drop-In Center do wonderful things for parents as well as for children. I have seen parents come through the program needing lots of support and turning that support that they receive around and giving that back to the program, and that plays into their child's education at a very young age and makes it a very successful experience for children as they become so involved at this young age in their child's education, and that goes with the child for the years as the child grows.
I loved it being here, but I was very proud of myself when I got home, and I really knew that they were just taking care of me. And that's what I knew.
I'm very sad about the Drop-In Center closing. My son Sam, who is over 5 years old now, went to Drop-In Center from the time he was an infant, and it saddens me that my daughter here, who's 9 months old, never really got a chance to go to Drop-In and never will get to experience how wonderful a place it was. It was really nice for him to be able to get out of the house, my son, to get out of the house and play around with other kids his age and to experience other adults who are just wonderful, caring, loving people. And it was a very safe environment, and I'm just very saddened that my daughter won't have it, like I said, and hopefully the Drop-In Center will make a reappearance in our community sometime in the future.
I have a cat, and Debbie taught a dog, Miko, and I have Tabby, Destiny, and Christy, and I have another cat.
Drop-In Center has meant a great deal to me and my 3 children. We've all been a part of the Drop-In Center for approximately 7 years, involved with parenting support groups as well as daycare for the children. I wish that the program wasn't cut. We really need more of this type of programming in this area. There's a great deal of a need and demand for it. I feel sorry for the children who won't be able to have a place to come to be with other children who don't normally go to a daycare.
I'm Pippi Kessler, and I was here ever since I was 8 months old, and I went until I was 4, and I'm just all upset about I really don't want it to close. I had a really good time when I was here. And and whenever I would go in to drop-in center, I would see all these children who used to, I used to look like them. I used to be a small child like them. And I'm kind of upset that it's going to stop. There won't be people who get to have, some time off, the parents, and, drop their children off. They won't be able to do that anymore. So I feel sorry for drop-in.
My son went here for about a couple of years, and it was a wonderful place for him. He'd always looked forward to coming here, and it was also a really good place, time for Margie and I to get a break and getting some things done for ourselves. And the women's group especially was helpful for Margie because it put her in contact with other mothers, and they could do some problem solving together and things like that. So it's unfortunate that this place is closing, and it's not the kind of thing when people who cut budgets, they look at numbers, they don't look at, they should come here.
Each of those toys represents a child in the current or future time who won't have child care available to them and who won't have services for their families available to them. Included in the governor's wagon full of toys, we have some broken toys. One of them is a broken train, and it has a little note on it that says something ending with, just like the drop-in center, this broken train is at the end of the line. Our broken toys are symbolic of the broken commitments the state once made to help families with young children. And those commitments have really gone down the drain. The other thing we're sending the governor is some diapers, because we want to tell him that it's time for a change, back to what we used to have. State priorities are going the wrong way these days. Priorities for children are just not there anymore, and we think it's time for a change. So we've written the governor a letter, and it says, "Dear Governor Wells, drop-in parents and staff are sending you these toys to tell you about what our county has lost as a result of state funding cuts. As a result of the gross cuts in federal money to states under the Reagan administration, as well as current economic factors, the Commonwealth has made major cuts to human services and local aid. One of the casualties has been the Drop-In Center, a parenting support program for families of very young children. Each toy we're sending represents a child in present and future who will no longer have access to child care or to family support. We're sending you a diaper to tell you we need a change in state funding priorities. In your inaugural address, you said that entrepreneurial government meant prevention, and that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. We want you to know that the Department of Social Services cut a whole load of prevention when they cut funding for the drop-in center last fall. There was no wisdom in that cut. For 13 years, we have functioned on the premise that when families are supported in their early years, they're less likely to need the more costly social services later. We're sending you some broken toys to remind you of the broken promises the state once made to families with young children. Your refusal to ask for new revenues means that essential services are constantly underfunded and fighting for scraps. We should remind you that 40,000 publicly traded corporations in the state pay the minimum state tax of $400. It is truly time for a change, back to the days when families could count on their government to be supportive. I'm going to ask... Yay! Okay. Well, I just wanted to say that I had somebody here on Monday mornings for 8.5 years, and not the same somebody, right? And sometimes I had 2 kids here, and none of my kids ever slept, and I would go home and go to sleep every Monday morning, and I counted on that sleep. And so you can imagine, there I was so bleary-eyed, and no one ever said a harsh word, ever. And as far as I know, never to my kids either. And I thought that was amazing. In 8.5 years, no one was ever mean to us, and I just thought that was really great. Now let me think. Oh yeah, and the other thing I wanted to say was I feel like the friends that we all made here are friends for life, and there's a special quality to this community that I just haven't seen in too many places. So I'm really sad. We're long gone from drop-in by now, but I'm really sad that it's not continuing, and I wish it would. I left my letter at home, so I tried to recapture some of the things that I had said in that as best I could. Drop-in has been many different things to many different families. It has provided us with child care and parenting classes. For many of us, drop-in provided our children's first experience with care away from home. Drop-in has also provided us with a community of friends that have supported us through pregnancy, birth, and the hazards of parenting. The staff of Drop-In is deeply grateful to the families who have supported our program, raising funds, helping us in staffing and snacks, and supporting us in a time of personal loss. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'd like to ask Nancy Minneke, who is the Associate Director at FCAC, for a brief word.
Joan, I don't know about that. I mean, I just start to tear up here. I guess I'd like to say and acknowledge all of you here who, many of you have been involved for a whole lot of years and a whole lot of hours. Drop-In Center may have given a lot to you all, but you really have made Drop-In what it's been throughout the years. When I think of every single year, whether it was Carol Sartz or then Anna Morrison coming to say, how are we going to keep this program going? Quite frankly, it was more than March, I think. Quite frankly, it was the parents, those of you who came out time after time after time to really support this program. Quite frankly, I'm not sure that we'll ever see anything quite like it. But we really appreciate all that you've given, both to the programs and especially to the kids.
We have Ernest.
Dear Governor Wells, I don't imagine you've ever done enough child care to have any first-hand knowledge about parental stress. If you haven't spent day after day with preschoolers, then it would be hard to appreciate what it's like to never be able to go to the bathroom by yourself, and what it's like to cook meals while holding an infant in one arm, while sidestepping a high chair with a grumpy toddler screaming to be picked up too. I bet you've never had to organize a trip to your doctor with 2 kids under 2 staggering under the bulk of diapers, toys, infant seats, physically exhausting yourself all for a simple half-hour visit. For those of us who spend the majority of our time parenting, the Drop-In Center has been a haven for us and our children. For 2.5 hours each week I could think. I could use my mind to write letters, to look something up, to solve a problem, to make a plan. I used the time for those quiet things, which were impossible to do with a baby and a toddler. I did not schedule doctor's appointments or shopping or anything that could possibly be done, no matter with what great difficulty, with 2 small children. I used the time exclusively for thinking, the sort of thinking you might indulge in twice a day while commuting to work. I was able to think during those 2 hours per week because I knew without a doubt that my children were benefiting from their time at the Drop-In Center and that they loved going there. They went enthusiastically every Thursday morning, and my 2-year-old asked to go more often. During the week in between, she talked about her playmates, the staff, and the activities. Not only... Not only... I can hold her. Let's see, where was I?
Oh, I need Drop-In. I got good friends there. I can drop my kids off, and they'll have good care. I can get some work done for an hour or 2. Drop-In helps me out with those dirty diaper blues.